So thanks to AudioControl for having us here, for joining our platform, and for giving us this opportunity to introduce you to Dante. So one of the first things I like to go through is just say, like, you know, who is Audinate and what is Dante? So we're one of those rare companies where people know the Dante name, they don't know the Audinate name. Audinate is just the company that made Dante, and Dante is a networking protocol. So Audinate, we're headquartered in Australia. Our view is that we serve the AV industry, but we let the AV companies be the experts in AV. We are specialists in networking. So we take our products, put them in audio video products, and then we're the glue that gets everybody together. And our goal is basically to develop the Dante platform so that if it says Dante on it, you know that it will work with another product that says Dante on it. So yeah, we are 100% interoperable between all AV manufacturers. Now, when it comes to understanding Dante, I usually say, you know, the who, what, where, when, and why, and how. Most of these questions are fairly simple. Who? Okay, well, it's Audinate, you know, our industry, and AudioControl is joining us. What are we doing? Audio, video over IP. Okay, we'll talk about that more. Where are we doing it? Well, the new thing is custom residential. We've been around a long time, but we're starting to appear in the residential space. When? Chris, you might actually be able to tell when you guys will have product, but now or very soon. And there are companies with products out there. But what I really want to kind of focus on is why. Before we get into technology and tell you all about all our bells and whistles, why do I care? Right? Why am I doing audio video over IP in the first place? I've been running cables, I've been doing everything for a long time. What's the big deal? So, like I said, I've been in this industry a long time. If you think back to about the year 2000, we ran lots and lots of cable. Obviously, high-speed internet was starting to come into the house, so we did run Ethernet, but we already had this legacy technology of control systems. So we had CrestNet wire, X-Link wire, IR, RS-232 wire, all of that would be individual wires. Then you'd have your audio wires that you ran everywhere. So you'd have, you know, RCA cables being extended all over. And back then we had RGB-HV or component video. All of these were separate cables, and you might have needed multiples, because while Ethernet is a network and I can put multiple devices on the network, anything can talk to anything. All of our other technologies were point-to-point. What that means is that if I wanted a connection from my AudioControl amplifier, you know, fed from zone 2 of my hi-fi receiver, or fed from like a central switcher, like from Extron, Crestron type of thing, I had to run that wire. And if I needed multiples, I needed multiple wires. You know, the difference, if you think about the internet, that's almost like saying I need a different cable to go to every website I want to browse. And that's a bummer, right? Because you start realizing the scale of point-to-point wiring becomes a real problem. And that's why we started creating central closets and all of this kind of stuff. So anyway, around 2003 is when the control companies started saying, you know what, we're not actually sending that much data. It would be cool if we could just get on that network. So around 2003, you started seeing control systems go on there, and eventually, at least, you would still run IR and RS-232 within a cabinet or within a closet to your devices, but you didn't have to stretch them through the infrastructure, right? Through the crawl spaces, through the walls, all that kind of stuff necessarily. And eventually what happened was more and more products started getting control over Ethernet, so you don't even have to run a separate cable. Right, you're doing control and you're getting your streaming all on networks. Well, eventually that RGB-HV became an HDMI connection. Okay, not a big deal. We went through the whole analog sunset and all of that kind of stuff. But what started happening was we started seeing balance. And it feels like we went to networks, but we really didn't. Because what Balance did is they just said, hey, I'm going to take these multi-core cables that you have, and I'm going to put it on Cat5, Cat5e, Cat6 cable, that kind of thing, right? So now the good news is you never have to worry about what cable to pull. It's pretty much always a category cable going through the walls. But These AV cables didn't join the network. They just used the same type of cable. That's a huge differentiation. You were still pulling cables from one point to another, and you still had to decide, well, geez, how many of these cables do I need to pull between locations? So what Dante does is it says, we're not going to run these as separate cables anymore. This stuff can all go on your network directly. So that can now go on the network, and now you don't have to run those extra cables. And that is a huge deal because, like I said, when you're planning, I can't tell you how many systems I went into a house and the homeowner adds one more thing, and then you go like, oh, you know, one more thing, one more thing, one more thing, and you eventually run out of cable. If you just have everything on a network where they're just sharing bandwidth and there's plenty of bandwidth to burn in there, then you never run into that problem. So we were going from this point where we had a ton of different cables that we were running, and now it's all just down on that network wire. One wire carries it all. And like I said, it is truly a network. So I don't have to worry about this closet to that closet, this closet to a different one, this one to the TV. So long as everybody's plugged into the network somewhere, we're going to get signal to it. So what this does is it greatly reduces how many cable pulls you need to do. It really eliminates individual cable runs. It reduces the types of cable that you need to pull. It reduces the cost of the cable, not only because of the numbers that you needed to pull, it reduces the cost of termination. It reduces just so many things because everybody can terminate a Cat5 cable pretty quickly now. It also future-proofs the infrastructure. So like I said, when somebody wants to add one more thing, this network has the bandwidth to add it. It's not a big deal. You know, like I said, there were a number of dealers that I worked with. Customer would ask for one more thing and they'd have to go figure out like, gosh, you know, I think I got an extra cable going from one location to another. I even saw some of them trying to figure out like how to take category cable and split it. Like, well, I don't really need the ground pins on the Ethernet cable, maybe on this one if I, you know, and they would get really creative. You don't have to do all this stuff anymore. And this is not something that's going to go away. If anybody thinks the internet is a fad, hopefully that type of thing is not a concern anymore. Everything going onto the network is the way it's going to go. That's right. That's right. The internet is not a fad. So, like I said, the big advantage is everything sits on the same network, and we don't need individual cable pulls from every device you want to talk to, right? It is just one cable that carries everything, and it can be your AV, it can be your infrastructure, your security cable, security cameras, your Wi-Fi, everything can be on the same system. When we do this, we can use any network switch you can find, okay? Pick your favorite brand, whatever you're comfortable configuring, we can get across it. There are some other protocols out there that cannot do that, or they require special firmware, or you've got to update it, or it has to be a specific firmware, and you have to match firmware between switches, and it gets to be a headache. For us, any switch, you're gonna be fine. We'll be able to make that happen. Now, Dante is a system that will appeal to discerning customers. We can support anything from 44.1 up to 192 kilohertz. So your high resolution fans, your audio files, people that want to do immersive sound. The other interesting thing is we also have precise timing so that we know when we send audio across the network, we know they're going to arrive at multiple destinations at the same time. So you'll get audio files that will listen to some network issues or something like that, go like, oh, well, the stereo field shifted because this speaker is now late. And so everything is starting to sound like it's coming from over there or something. This also helps in multi-zone scenarios. So I have speakers in the hallway and the family room and all that stuff. I don't know if you've ever run into problems with other systems where the play out time is different. And so you start getting this sort of slight delay as you go from one room to another. And it's just, there's points where you just can't really listen to it, or you can't understand the words, or if you're listening to a talk show, you can't understand what they're saying. Dante solves all of that. How much capacity do we have? When we're with a 1 gigabit link, we can do 512 channels. That's a lot. I did some big houses. I don't think I ever did anything that would use more than 512 channels down a single cable. So that, you know, now that you have immersive sound, if you come up to it, you know, I'll tell you what, we can also do 10 gig, and then it can be 5,120 channels, you know. So we scale, but yeah, so you're not going to run into a problem of capacity here. And everybody says this, but I will prove it. We actually are easy to use. And while Dante might be new to the residential space, it is not new. And we'll give you some examples of where it's used and where that support comes from. So yeah, there are thousands of products from hundreds of manufacturers out there right now. So that's a little bit of the why. Basically, it reduces your cost dramatically. It frees you up on infrastructure designs. You're not having to scrap around looking for cables. You're getting on a system that delivers the highest quality fidelity available. We'll actually get into it. I mean, if you're saying like, well, is it going to be as good as a movie theater? The movies were designed on a network running Dante. So yes, yes. Anyway, so yeah, so the quality's there, the cost savings, it's all plus, and it's not a fleeting or brand new technology that you're deciding, gosh, you know, are they still going to be around? So let's get into the how this all works. What I'm going to do is a quick demonstration of how you find your devices on the network. I'll start with that because I always said whenever I did programming, I had to set up a DSP or whatever. The hardest thing was finding it on the network in the first place. So once I was in, I felt like, okay, at that point I recognized the objects and all that stuff, but getting into the box the first time could easily take an hour or two. So let's address that. Once you're in there, how do you make subscriptions? Basically, how do you route signals from device to device? From there, rather than have custom, you know, numbers all over the place, IP addresses and bundle numbers and all this kind of stuff, let's give everything a name so you can tell them apart. And then how do you make your basic settings if you wanted to do some IP address, sample rate, you know, all this kind of stuff. So let me come out of this presentation for just a moment. So this is the software we have that will work with all of our devices. It's called Dante Controller, and it's free. Now, one of the things I'll say about this, let me actually boot it up. And you'll see I don't have to do anything. Oh, wait a minute. It's on the wrong screen. Hold on. I'll bring it over. Whoop. Ah, well, I don't know if I got it there fast enough, but it starts off and it doesn't see anything. All it does is it sends out a beacon and says, hey, I'm Dante Controller. I'm looking for my buddies. They all respond. We've taken care of this. You don't have to know a default IP address, and then that default IP address can't work with the customer's network and all this kind of stuff. We just start off the HCP ready to go, and we send a pulse that says, hey, here I am on the network. So finding it is as simple as launching the program. Once you've got these, if you want to make a subscription, basically you can see everything has a name. So everything at the top is a transmitter, it's sending signal, and everything down here is a receiver. So I could say, oh, in fact, this one already has some signal from this device. I'll take those out real quick. That's from my previous training session. So what you can do is, yeah, you just kind of come in here and you say, I want these channels here, and then I want a couple of channels from, let's see, from this device. I'll put those on the next channels here, and that's it. That's all you need to do. Congratulations, you've now set up a Dante system. Now, if you wanted to customize these names, you can see I have things over here. So you can see I have the main speaker, the sub, and things like that. We can customize these names. So all you do, right now you can see I'm in network view. Whoops, I didn't mean to shrink. So I'm in network view. That means as I go through these tabs, I'm going to see all of my devices. I'm going to see IP addresses, all this kind of stuff. I can see how much bandwidth is being used. No problem. But if I double click on a device, I'm now going to get device view. So instead of seeing all the devices and only a little bit of information, I'm going to see one device with a lot more information here. So I can go to device configuration here and I can say, all right, instead of calling this stage box, I'll call this main whole home amp. Apply that. Okay, and then it's going to basically restart that device, and then we've got our new name. Okay. Now I can also go in there and say, so this could be all left, all right. I could make this one, bedroom 1 left, bedroom 1 right. You get the idea. So you can just go down here and label things so it's very easy once you're making your patching. Now, once I've done that, I've got these names. I can start to follow where this is coming from and then exactly what these are going to. I don't have to start referring to charts. I don't have to have, like I said, it's not IP addresses and bundle numbers and all this kind of stuff. It is names. And so that not only helps you when you're setting it up, but that helps you when you're coming back at another time and saying, I need to make a change, right? And you don't have to dig up all your documentation. It's all documented right there. One of the, when I was doing programming, we used to call that self-documentation, right? If you make everything clear from the beginning, it's going to be fine. Oh, and then I'll show you how to do your IP address and sample rate. I mean, things like this are really easy. So again, I'm just going to double click on the device. So right in here under device config, I have the name. Right here, I could choose the sample rates. This one only supports 48K, it doesn't do 96K. I could pick one like this guy that will go up to 192K. Just depends on what your device needed to support. And then if you want to change your IP addresses and things like that, well, that's right here. It looks just like it does on your computer. So it's saying I'm automatically getting a configuration right now, but if I want to do it manually, now I can go type in my numbers and I'll hit apply and it'll reboot and take that address. So getting around Dante is really easy. In a few minutes there, you probably saw most of what you would need for the bulk of your installation. And frankly, that's kind of one of those things that our developers wanted to do. You know, Dante wasn't the first network. There was actually systems like CobraNet or EtherSound, if you've heard of those before. But our engineers kind of looked at it. We had better ways of doing things. That would be a whole nother presentation. I'd go into that. But they really had the idea that you shouldn't have to be, you know, a computer scientist to be able to figure out how to make AV work. Right? If you want to make the system grow, it has to be manageable by the people in the industry. That's one of your limits of scalability, is how many people can use it. So we definitely solved that. Now, when all this stuff comes together, one of the cool things is that Audinate makes all of the equipment that you're going to use. Asterisk. We make the chipset that does all of the communication, right? We focus on the things that do the network communication. So we make Dante controller, we make virtual sound cards, so you can actually turn your computer into a device. But generally what happens is we've got our chipset here. Oops, I'm on the wrong, here we go. So because we're making all of those interfaces and we're testing them all, we know that this just goes into your customer's product, into the manufacturer's product. And once they've done that, we've already done the testing to make sure that this will talk to the chipset in another customer's product, in another manufacturer's product. And so you know it's going to work. If it says Dante, it's going to work. We deal with everything networking, and we say, hey, AV manufacturer, you focus on how the best amplifier should be designed. Is it class A, class B, AB, class D, you know, not my world. That's where we say AudioControl, you are the experts in that. We just know how to get audio there in time so that you're ready to go.
That is our world, yes.
That is your world. Yep, we divide and conquer, right?
And Patrick, there's a couple on the chat.
Sure.
I would chime in here.
No, yeah, I would say when I share the screen, the chat window goes away.
Yeah,
So
no,
it's
no
one of
problem. But no, and I know a couple of you guys got in here a little bit late, and so I just thought I'd hit on a few questions here. One of which is, the implementation and what we're going to be doing with Dante technology. We announced this initially with our 70-volt CM series of amplifiers, and we're going to be extending that out to also be part of our Director series amplifiers. So there'll be a Dante port as an option available on the amplifiers, such that if you're using the Dante technology with a Dante, a Crestron or Symmetrics or some of the other products available upstream, and then you'll be able to connect over network to our amplifiers without having to run a bundle of cables and RCAs and things like that. So there's a lot of interface capabilities, and also if you want to expand, from our 8-channel to another 8-channel to another 8-channel, we'll be able to communicate via the Dante port, also with a single cat cable. So a lot of ease of efficiency, and we'll have some specific product announcements after the show about what we're doing there. But I think the ground point here is we wanted to kind of get everyone educated or a little bit more aware of what's going on with the technology. And this is something, a lot of companies, I think, pick proprietary stuff. This is a technology that's being used by a number of companies that are out there. So, and then Patrick, one of the questions was about, from Dynamic, is a standard network range extender can be used to extend a Dante network, with a question mark.
Okay, so one of the things I would say about that is we don't do Wi-Fi. So we only go over a wired network. Basically, once you go over Wi-Fi, I don't know if people understand the difference between a network switch and a network hub. But back in the day, we had hubs. So basically, anybody that sent a message in there, that message would be repeated to every other device connected to the hub. The problem was you started ending up with collisions, and then people had to retransmit, and it was very inefficient. By definition, that's what Wi-Fi has to do. So you start ending up with challenges like that. So Dante is a system where we say, look, we're going to give you really high performance, but it's only going to happen on wired space because that's the only place where collisions can be avoided. And we make sure that you get the audio absolutely pristine immediately, so you don't feel latency. I think we've all been streaming things right now. I've got my smart TV or something like that. I hit play, or it's playing, and I hit pause, right? And it plays for like another second before it finally pauses because there's so much latency in the system. Dante doesn't have that. It is like a millisecond or less to get across the network. So yeah, you can't do that kind of thing with Wi-Fi. There's nobody that does it right now. With the high quality and the low latency, you have to make sacrifices in there somewhere.
And I think in our channel, pulling wire is the most solid way of making that connection, and certainly adding value to the client. So,
yeah, I always told people, Wi-Fi is for convenient devices or things you need to be able to carry around. So your phone, your tablet, things like that, great. For something that is going to be in the same place all the time, just pull a wire and be done with it, and then you don't have to solve those. You don't have to go chasing that problem all day long.
And there's another network question here, Patrick. It says, will it work over mesh networks or each router on mesh has Ethernet ports, but the routers themselves communicate over wireless? A lot of network questions.
So will it communicate over mesh network? So we don't go over wireless, period. We just don't do it. Wired only, that's the only way to solve it. Now people, when we get into the commercial world, let me come back to that, because once I start showing you some of the applications, then I can build on that and give you some of the examples of where people have used it. And I can give you not only the official answer, but also the what do people do in the field sometimes, not with our blessing, but they do it.
Excellent.
We all know it's custom, right?
There are best practices, and then there are okay, what do you do to get the job done? So
yeah,
we'll focus on the best.
I got the guest house or the cabana back there. How do I reach it?
Exactly. Excellent.
Okay, so if I do that, I'm sharing again. Okay, so yeah, we're getting right up to that point. So like I said, basically what the manufacturers are going to use our chipset or our firmware or something like that, and they can put it into their product directly. Now, right now, most of the people are using our hardware. So it is a chipset that they get from us. In the future, you may also see more products where there's a chipset that they already have, and we have firmware that they can blast into there. That's something that has only come up in the last year. So you will see things like that coming up where it's a device with an Ethernet port just suddenly becomes a Dante port. So that kind of thing will happen. And like I said, you can also use your computer as a Dante device. For 29 bucks, there's virtual sound card, and you can suddenly create a port on your computer that is anywhere from 2x2 to 64 by 64. We give you the ability to size it because obviously once you're running it virtually, you don't actually have a physical device in there. The bigger it is, the more CPU power it takes, right? So, you know, make it appropriately sized. I will tell you that there are people in the professional world using 64 by 64, recording major shows, works great. So this is great for streaming or local media players. So your iTunes, your Amazon Music, Pandora, whatever your favorite source is. It's also great, given the situation now, there's a lot of people doing home conferencing. Dante is heavily used in conferencing world. I'm using a microphone right here. This is a Dante microphone. So I just have this thing. It's got a network cable out the back. It shows up. And actually, if I have Dante controller here, so here, wait a minute. Sorry, let me close these up. Here is, it's called podium mic right now, but that's the microphone I'm talking into. Here's the speaker I'm listening to you from, and here's my laptop. So I've actually got all that stuff patched in. So once you do that, here was a picture of me setting this up this morning. You come down here, and just like you would choose a headset or something like that, you can come in here and choose Dante Virtual Sound Card, right? And whatever you've landed on there becomes your system. So if you've run ceiling speakers in your room, and that's on your AudioControl amplifier that has a Dante port, you can take your computer and feed that directly to there if you like. And like I said, I'd say that with the customer base that you are dealing with, you are likely dealing with people who want to look good and sound good in their home office, right? So this is the type of thing that you'll be able to get into, and we have plenty of things to work with there. As far as adoption, RH Consulting is a company that has done counts to try to figure out who's winning the horse race, right? Who is, how many products are there with various platforms? And they didn't do it for our benefit necessarily in the beginning. We weren't the leader at the time when he started, but there has been a clear leader since. And it's funny because this actually says Dante has 8 times the adoption of the closest competitor. The closest competitor is CobraNet, which he actually stopped counting in 2018 because he said, yeah, it's a legacy format. The only reason companies make that product anymore on CobraNet is because if you put something in 10 years ago and something breaks, you need to be able to replace it. But that's not a platform that people build on today. So when you actually compare us to anything else that people are actually using, it gets much bigger than that. And so Dante is definitely the de facto standard in the commercial audio space. So we're talking about live sound, we're talking about recording studios, we're talking about film production, convention centers, hotels, all sorts of things. So here's an example. Yeah, this is sort of a stadium example where all the speakers around the stadium are all tuned in, and that's how we get the signal around there. You'll see it on films. So they'll have microphones all over when they're capturing things on site, and that's all connected with a network now. It's kind of funny because when you deal with broadcast and film, you normally can't talk about these things, but these people were nice enough to actually let us promote that. Here's a mix room where people are making the films, right? Probably doesn't look that much different than the awesome theaters that you guys have, except all of this would be theater seats down here. But this is actually where they're mixing everything and putting it together, and that is all connected by Dante. As far as other ones, it's always interesting. So the Arsenio Hall show, this will just give you an idea of how long we've been around. In 2012, I think it was, Arsenio Hall relaunched his show, and the entire system was all connected by Dante. And that really cemented how Dante was going to be used and how production was going to be used from that point forward. A lot of talk shows that you watch nowadays will be using Dante. Major tours. Here's an article about the Foo Fighters using Dante as their backbone for their concerts. The Grammys. Believe it or not, before last year, everything was still connected analog. So that everybody had their microphones. It's the same team that does the Grammys every year. And it was one of those things that they get called in, they've got to do this thing. It's a high pressure show, and they just didn't want to change anything. Eventually they said, you know, we haven't changed anything in so long, we're way overdue. So they finally started using Dante to get the audio everywhere, and the technicians actually said the sound improvement was dramatic. Because actually whenever they had a microphone or something like that, they had a 7-way split by the time you consider all the mix positions and the broadcast and the recording and everything that goes on. Being able to do it all digitally was huge. And for something on that scale, you really need something like Dante to do it. You put all this together, this doesn't suck. Audinate won an Emmy for innovation in audio over IP. It is used so much in the industry, and it has changed the way production is done. They gave us an Emmy for it. That's a little bit of acceptance. So anyway, so it's in the commercial space, no doubt about it, and in the broadcast and music production and all that kind of thing. And that's why you'll see this massive, massive, massive number. Now, one of the things to think about is when things come from the commercial space into the residential space, it's never quite the same. And it drives me batty, right? We had XLRs, connectors in the pro space, and then it was RCA in the consumer. It was balanced connections versus unbalanced. It was the voltage levels were different even on analog. Analog, how could you make it not compatible? We'll find a way. Once we went to digital, we couldn't even agree on what 0 dBV meant. So you had different full scale references. You had copy protection schemes and all that stuff that got put onto these systems. Dante doesn't suffer from any of that. The same Dante system that is used in the commercial space is exactly what we're giving to the residential space. There was no point in modifying it and crippling it in some way. So you can take your audio control amplifier, plug it into the mixer at your favorite concert, and it would pull that stream in. So there are no compatibility issues going in that space. And so certainly there's going to be a lot of products out there that you can build on today, but there's also increasing adoption in the CDS space. And you'll start to see companies like
Magtown Golf Course.
So obviously AudioControl could talk to products from Bose, from Elan, from JBL, from Symmetrix, from Crestron, from Extron. So you could imagine having a Crestron central switch in the closet, and then it's feeding your audio control system.
Yes, Gary, do you guys have any openings right around 3 o'clock today?
What you got there?
I got him. Sorry.
Okay.
John Smith. Thank you.
All right. So, so you've got all these companies. So like I said, you could imagine the audio control amplifier getting the signal from the Crestron switch. They've been a Dante user for a long time. You'll also see it from receivers and things like that. JBL currently has a Dante port on their synthesis line. And so you could take, the Zone 2 amplifier out of the theater. So you've got some, you're doing a Star Wars party, or you're doing a World Series party, or, World Cup, or whatever you got. Take the sound, pump that out into the hallways and everything. So if somebody goes to the kitchen to get a drink, or they got to go to the restroom, that they're still hearing the game as they go everywhere. So Dante is the standard. You are going to be able to build on these things, and the momentum we have from other industries is incredible. And that is a little bit about who Audinate is, how Dante works. It's easy to use. There's a ton of support for it out there. Now, with that in mind, Chris, I'm sorry, let's go back to the network question. Because I think now we can actually put a little bit of context on that.
No problem.
I'm trying to find it here real quick.
Let's see which one we had. So,
there's an easy one here. Is there any advantage to using fiber? So yeah, we can go across any wired network. So that would be category cable or fiber. There's not an advantage from Dante's perspective, but of course fiber will allow you to go further. So if you suddenly said, I've got to run, category cable can go 328 feet, right? It's 100 meters. Fiber generally starts at about 300 meters. And I mean, you can go kilometers with it. So, there are times for fiber. Yeah. Also, fiber will get you higher capacity. So where most category cable kind of stops at 1 gig, there are some applications where you can do 10 gig. Fiber really goes to the 10, the 1 gig, 10 gig, 20, 50, 100 gig. You can go like crazy bandwidth with it. So I just recently moved to this area up here in near Portland, and I had wire pulled. So what I did is from the closet, I had category cable pulled to the rooms, but then I had an upstairs closet and a downstairs closet, and I linked that with fiber. So this way, I will have ridiculous amounts of bandwidth for a very long time. And so that would be a good time to start thinking about fiber. If I'm linking closets, lots and lots of signals can go across there, and fiber is fairly inexpensive now. So,
Patrick, I think in the residential space too, we're seeing a lot more guys use fiber, specifically running from processors to displays or whatever because of 4K and things like that. So where fiber used to be an occasional thing, now it's becoming more and more of a standard. So I think they're finding themselves, and you're right, it's a lot more cost effective from that. So cool. Okay. There was another question down there about relationship between audio over IP, AES 67, and Dante audio over IP a la Savant.
Okay. So the relationship between Dante and AES 67, AES 67 was basically a way to take Dante and allow it to speak to other types of systems. Now that's the idea. The application really only played out in the broadcast world because there were some companies who said, Dante, you did a great thing, or Audinate, you did a great thing with Dante, but I'm going to create my own version of it. And if we go back to that chart, some of those lines that were just kind of sitting at the bottom with very low participation, that's some of those companies. But so once some broadcasters spent some money on that, they said, well, this was a dead end. How do we get this thing out? How do we speak to other people? And AES 67 was the way, because otherwise what they had to do is they had to come to the edge of their system, give an analog link to ours, and then we'd pick it back up and move on. So AES 67 was just a way to get rid of that analog step and create a link. Now AES 67, if you've ever dealt with it, it is oh my God, is it a painful process? Because you don't have Dante controller automatically discovering your devices and just one-click routing. If I go through that explanation of how to make a link, first of all, I'll probably have to explain the 5 different conventions on how people think about making a link. And once you've learned all of those, then all of those become lengthy processes, and then you can kind of go from there. So for the residential space, I think the AES 67 application doesn't really come into play unless you're dealing with a broadcaster who had something specific. But we do support it. So if you have that need, we can do it. Now, once you get to Savant, I believe they are AVB.
Right.
Yeah. So the thing.
Right. One question. Maybe I got confused, but I understood that the new CM audio control amplifiers would work with Dante. But as far as I can see, there's only one Ethernet port on the amplifier, and Dante requires its own dedicated jack. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, the images we have right now, when we first introduced the CM, have the single network port for programming. There will be a secondary port option available for the CM series that will allow it to work with Dante.
Oh,
Okay.
right.
And actually, I'll clarify that. There are manufacturers that just blend their port with the Dante port. Both of them are going to be on the same network once it hits the switch anyway. So as a general rule for Dante, they can be combined, yes. But yeah, it's also common for companies to have an option card that slides in or something like that, and then it would appear as a separate port.
Cool. And Patrick, you guys have a fair amount of content, I believe, if it was on your website or on YouTube, but there was a whole certification series that I think I've pointed a few dealers towards it. You want to just expand for people that want to really get more and more into it?
Yeah, so being the training manager, you think I would have put that in my presentation, right?
I'm giving you all the leading stuff I can.
Well, hey, you know. So audinate.com/certify is the place you can go, and you know what, I'm gonna yeah, I can show up as a learner. Okay, hold on.
I'll know your password now. Okay.
Yeah, it's ... right? So anyway, you'll be able to come inside here and say, I want to take a course. And so we have classes. There's level 1, 2, and 3. I would say taking level 1 is a no-brainer. I would definitely do that. Taking level 2 is highly recommended, I would say, for the residential space. Level 3, I would definitely leave off there unless you are doing what we call an enterprise network. So an enterprise network basically means somebody is doing, and by the way, I don't know, if I have to explain what an enterprise network is, then you're not doing an enterprise network. I think that's probably the easiest thing. Are you creating routers? Are you doing, you know, authentication when somebody joins the network? This kind of stuff. Those are all enterprise network things. But when you get to our site, yeah, what I would do is just click here on English or whatever your favorite language is, and then it will narrow it down very quickly, right? So this way you don't have to sort through all of them. But yeah, so those are free. You just sign up on our website. It's free. You just create an account. You say, I want to log in. I want to take this class. No problem. Level 1 and 2, I would say within a couple hours, you could do all of it, including taking the test, passing it. The one thing I'll say about it, the program we have right now is going to go through an update by January. But if you take this now, in January, there will be a recertification class that just says, here's the new things we've added to it. So it's not like, you know, it's not like what you do now is a throwaway. So I would just look for that. And that's it. Yeah, so the level 1, basically, level 1 was designed to give you everything you need to know to use a system where everything is plugged into one switch. Level 2 takes you to the point where you can have multiple switches and you start understanding the implications of linking switches together. That's sort of the simple way to look at it. So I think, yeah, I think level 2 is a good place for people to be.
Good. Yeah, and guys, one of the reasons we wanted to host this today, I mean, you look at the progression of distributed audio, you know, technology. I mean, you know, we still have dealers sometimes that run 1 amp with 18 speakers and an autoformer, you know, which I probably not anybody here on this page, but I know it takes a while for various infrastructures, for pre-wires, for talking about projects, you know, and the applications that come about here related to Dante and audio control will allow, you know, multiple audio control amplifiers or other Dante products to talk to each other, to be able to extend cabling. If you're doing houses that are 5, 10, 15, 20,000 feet or yachts or things like that, where you're going to have multiple rack rooms and you want to get it from point A to point B, Dante will facilitate that. I envision at some point, where you can take local sources, from an office or a bedroom or whatever. You can use some of the Dante connector boxes that will put those devices on the network, and then they can communicate, around the house in different spaces. So I think you'll see probably more consumer residential oriented devices that will talk that talk that can then put it on the network. So there's a lot of expansion opportunities there that are pretty good. So we got a couple more questions here, and then I certainly be cognizant of everyone's time. There's one, how do you manage down mixing for extracting multi-channel streams in rooms with only 2 speakers?
As I say, I just mentioned that to him. So,
oh, did you reply to that?
But well, I replied to him. The answer is that Dante doesn't do mixing. We don't do sample rate conversion. We don't make things warm. We don't have transformers. Whatever a device gives us, we give you that exact thing on the other side. It was funny. I was doing a presentation for a company that was it was for Yamaha. They made something called AFC, active field control. So when you were in a space, you could suddenly make the reverb tail longer in it. They had speakers everywhere, and it created this environment. There's several companies that have done this. So if you go to a concert, like a classical thing, they can say, well, for this piece, we'd like to have a 3-second reverb tail. For this one, we'd like to have a 5-second, so on. So they just push a button, bam, they've got it. So, the guy that was presenting before me was going through, here's the early reflections, and here's the tail from the back, and here's, he's going through all this stuff. And I was just like, wow, this is really cool. Then I had to get up and present. And they had a string quartet playing, right? So that you could hear it in the space. So I got up and I just told them, well, okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to bring the string quartet back out, and we're going to have everything set up in a 192.168 network. And then we're going to flip it. I'm going to make everything a 10.0 network, and we're going to see if more bits actually creates a better sound environment. Of course, everybody starts chuckling. I'm like, that's exactly it. There's no difference. We give you exactly what you want with no change. So at any rate, so for the mix down, we don't do mixing. What you would do for that environment is you would have, like, your receiver has surround within the room. The zone 2 output usually has a 2 down mix, and then that part would come out to go to the rest of your house. So I don't know if most, by the way, most, your $300 receiver won't normally do that. They'll just say, if I have a zone 2, you get the left and right. Maybe they'll blend the center channel in, but the surround and all that stuff just kind of disappears. But when you get to the receivers that you guys are usually putting in, usually the zone 2 will have a down mix. There'll be a separate decode and put that in there. So that's something to look for if you want to do that. Cool. Although that's something you had to deal with in the analog space too. So
Patrick, I'm going to, since this is a pretty close group here, I'm going to share a screen real quick, guys, of what the CM series platform will be looking like here. You'll see where the Dante port is here on the back of it, next to our network port for the DSP. So this is just one of our engineers who's on the call sent me this just so I can show this. So you guys are getting the first look at it, shall we say. So obviously we've got our analog inputs, our digital inputs, our zone connections, and then the ports will be here. So you'll see this kind of port option on the CM series, as well as an option on our director amplifiers also. So you were here first, coming to this training.
Cool.
Excellent.
It's exciting to see.
All right. Let's see. There's a couple other here. Timeline, Bob is asking here, I think engineering is quoting us in the 4th quarter right now. So kind of coincide with the relaunch of the CM series. So we'll get a little firmer on timelines when we get all that put together. But it's needless to say, it's an exciting technology. So we're full tilt boogie on this. So
yeah.
All right, Patrick, any of those other questions there that I think you've covered them in terms of the AVB Dante discussion. I think you touched on that.
Yeah, I think that, I'll just summarize it. The AVB thing, that generally speaking, not all AVB products can talk to AVB products. It's an open standard that people can apply, and they don't always apply it the same way, and as such, they're not necessarily compatible. So normally what you see from AVB is you will see things, you're going to have to buy it all from one manufacturer to make it work with others. And that can be very restricting. Okay, so because eventually, whenever companies enter that scenario where they say you have to buy everything from me, eventually they realize they don't make everything. And if they do, they're probably not the best at it, right? I mean, you can get companies that are like, oh, I make, you know, you can get well, I don't want to create a problem for any company, but is there any company that makes really awesome projectors and really awesome speakers and really awesome touch panels? You know, no, there is none. So in your industry, you always have to be able to bring things together, and that's what a standard like Dante does for you.
Cool.
There is another one just asking a general question. Aside from bandwidth, is there any advantage to using Cat 6A or Cat 6 or Cat 5e or something like that? So I would say that Cat 5e and Cat 6 are both solidly in the gigabit range. The reason why there's still 2 is because the cables are a different thickness. So again, if you have to deal with a building that has one infrastructure or the other, you want to be able to find products that are going to match that. If I was doing a new building today, Cat 5e and Cat 6 are almost the same price, so I would just do that. Getting into Cat 6A, there is a price premium for it. Shielded versus unshielded. Everybody's got an opinion on that, and I don't know if anybody's 100% right. I think that if the only thing that I've heard is that makes sense is shielding. It doesn't necessarily stop RF, interference from coming into your cable. It stops it from going out. So when you're running multiple, the idea behind it was if you're running multiple Cat 5 in a conduit, or Cat 6, or multiple cables in a conduit, and they're all packed right next to each other, right in parallel, the shielding helps prevent interference between those different cables in that conduit. That's kind of the main thing. And of course, shielding only helps if you ground it. If you don't, then it just becomes a resistor, and it actually shortens your cable length. So I don't know if that answers the question. Hopefully that's a couple of things to think about.
So guys, hey, thank you, Patrick, for being here.
Thanks for having me.
I've recorded this also, so if anybody would like to see a copy of it, certainly please let me know.